So the U.S. Attorney General William Barr recently releasing a 4-page summary based on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report into possible interference by Russia into the 2016 election, basically giving the U.S. president the all clear. Or at least the U.S. president says so.
Sort of, yeah. First of all, it's a 4-page summary from a not particularly objective source. Barr was appointed because he's a fervent Trump loyalist. And I think we want to absolutely see the full report before we draw any conclusions. Even on that 4-page report, that account of Mueller's account, it doesn't say that there's no evidence he did anything. Even on the particular question of collusion, it simply says there's not enough evidence, according to Barr, not enough evidence to warrant further proceedings. That's not the same thing as no evidence, and it's certainly not the same thing as a blanket exoneration that he's never done anything wrong in his life, which is the way this is going to be used, by the way. In the simplicities of politics, this is now going to be waived anytime anybody accuses Trump of anything. But I think there's a lot more still to be found, even on that particular question of the collusion, because what we do know, it's not contested, is that Russian operatives came to Donald Trump Jr. and said, we've got dirt on Hillary that came from Russian sources, would you like it? And he said, yeah, I love it, especially if it's as you say. There are multiple meetings of Trump operatives with Russian operatives, which they then lied about, and some of whom have gone to jail over. So there's all kinds of context. Whether it all adds up to collusion or such is another question. What's also documented and not in dispute by anybody serious is that the Russians went to great lengths to try and help Trump get elected. Now, whether they did so in collusion with Trump is another matter, but they seem strangely insistent on that they wanted him to be elected, and he's paraded all kinds of strange behaviors of deference towards Vladimir Putin and towards Russian foreign policy objectives, for example, trying to harm NATO, trying to break up the European Union, and so on. That collusion becomes really one small question, even of that issue. And of course, there's all kinds of other things of which Trump has been accused in terms of conflict of interest or various other types of corruption. So, yeah, it's a good day for him on that one question. The other big question, of course, is, was there obstruction of justice in regard to that? And again, one should be suspicious of Barr when he says, if you can't show the underlying crime, then there can't possibly be obstruction of justice in trying to cover up that. First of all, that's just absolutely legal nonsense. No lawyer would agree with that. Second of all, it's logical nonsense, because what it would amount to would be, if you were successful in covering up your crime through obstruction of justice, such that we weren't able to establish it, then you also get off on the obstruction of justice charge. You can't possibly countenance that. So I think there's still a lot to be played out in that, and obviously what we really need to do is to see the full Mueller report and not just this 4-page summary.
So the Democrats have called to see this full report. Do you think eventually we'll see it?
I have to imagine eventually we will. I think they have powers of subpoena, for example. It would be remarkable if it didn't. The Trump administration nevertheless seems strangely reluctant to release this report that supposedly fully exonerates him. But that will, I think, be both a political and, I suppose, a legal contest, I would expect.
So now the Attorney General has deferred to the Justice Department. So will they be conducting their own investigation, completely, or are they going to be referring to this Mueller report as well?
That's a question I don't think I'd be qualified to answer. I would suppose, the wheels of justice in America are many and complex, and it's one of the strengths of the system is there are multiple sources of power. It's harder to just shut things down the way you can, for example, in this country. So not just on the obstruction of justice, there are any number of processes that were kicked off by Mueller, for example, in the Southern District of New York, the prosecutor's office there. There are independent processes on different charges that can go ahead, and there are independent sources within the Justice Department. So it's not clear to me whether the Attorney General can just shut things down, and if there are strands still to be pursued there in obstruction of justice, you may well see that happen.
Questions now come into play in terms of clemency and granting pardon to those, 6 campaign associates that were associated, if you will, with possible interference or collusion with the 2016 election. One of them, namely Paul Manafort, people like Papadopoulos. And I'm wondering whether or not this, from your perspective, if this is the right position that the president should be taking, or if this is his next move.
It would be hard to imagine that he would want to set off the kind of firestorm after this that he would do that. But this is a very unpredictable president. He's a president who's not bound either by norms of ethics or of common sense. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility that he could do so if he felt he wanted to prove a point or what have you, including his, I'm sure, sincere belief at some level that he's innocent of everything. So it's not inconceivable, but it's, I would say, still at this point unlikely.